The Zonai race is one of the most mysterious and speculated on elements of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The presence of a godlike race that descended from the skies above to the world of Hyrule, only to disappear entirely, opens the door to so many questions. Like, why did they come to Hyrule in the first place? And what happened to them? Did something cause them all to die off? Or did they somehow discover the key to immortality? The information given to us in Tears of the Kingdom was still pretty limited, but from the crumbs of lore that were given to us, we can theorize a bit. Spoiler warning, this theory will be heavily referencing the Dragon's Tears quest as well as the endgame, so if you haven't completed that yet, you've been warned. With that in mind, let's dive in and explore the Zonai's dealings with immortality. While Tears of the Kingdom significantly expanded our knowledge of the Zonai, which in Breath of the Wild had only been hinted at, there's still so much we don't know about this highly powered civilization. The question that really got to me during the game was, why would this highly advanced civilization, which seemingly for the entirety of the Zelda timeline had existed up in the sky, bother with coming down to Hyrule in the first place? In my previous video, I discussed the evidence that I felt indicated that the Zonai were potentially conquerors of Hyrule, taking over some of the races through military means and others through diplomacy. We know that the land-dwelling races of Hyrule were significantly underpowered compared to the Zonai, who they viewed as gods. And I think there are different ways you can interpret the Zonai takeover of Hyrule, whether through benevolent or violent conquest, but it still leaves the question, what did they come for? I've alluded to this before, but the big takeaway is I think they came for Zonite. The constructs hint that there was a shortage of Zonite in the Sky Islands, and if you think about it, it makes sense. The islands themselves don't have a ton of landmass, so unless there are some huge islands that we can't reach, you could logically conclude that they'd exhausted their supply a long time ago. So they came to Hyrule and formed a kingdom so they could have access to the huge amount of Zonite located far beneath the surface. We know that Zonite powers their devices and essentially their entire civilization, so it would make sense that that's a resource they'd be eager to have a plentiful source of. For now, let's put a pin in that topic. The other big question that was left unanswered in the game was, what happened to the Zonai? By the time of Zelda's memories in the distant past, there were only two Zonai left in Hyrule, Minoru and Rauru. But we aren't told what happened to the others. Did they return to the skies? Did they die out? With such a highly advanced, overpowered civilization, one would think that they would live forever, and perhaps that's exactly what they were trying to do. Through the plot of the game, we are presented with two possible Zonai pathways to immortality. The first, which we saw demonstrated by Zelda, is to eat a secret stone and become a dragon that lives forever, in an ancient ceremony called Draconification. So far, we have seen 5 in-game references to this process. We saw Zelda and Ganondorf, as well as 3 returning dragons, these so-called Servants of the Springs, Naydra, Dinral, and Farosh. Based on their appearance, I believe these 3 are examples of Draconified Zonai. We are told by Minoru, through her several warnings to Zelda, that this process is considered forbidden by Zonai society, as when you become a dragon, you live forever, but you lose your sense of self. Clearly, this is an imperfect immortality, one that she sought to overcome through technology. Minoru ultimately discovers another way to live forever, one where your soul is preserved. Minoru's special stone-amplified gift is the ability to separate her soul from her body, and she utilizes that, along with a massive construct factory, to build herself a robotic host to house her soul in the future, after her own physical body succumbs to wounds inflicted by Ganondorf. I found it odd that there would be a whole factory just to build a body for one person, and this is what got me thinking. While Minoru was the only Zonai to ultimately use the construct factory, what if it was built with the intent of creating an alternative form of immortality for the full Zonai people? In the end, only 2 construct bodies that we know of were built, but the presence of the depots implies to me that there were more in storage. Prior to its corruption, Minoru's first construct body was waiting for her, not at the factory, but at the Spirit Temple. And while we're on the subject, let's take a quick look at the temple itself. The owl iconography throughout is of course associated with Minoru and the virtue of wisdom. Within the temple, there's a central platform surrounded by water, and walls covered in small caves. Some of the caves are empty and have Poe spirits in them, while others are filled in, with an image that resembles the terminal where you build Minoru's body. The temple's design raised a few questions for me. Like, could the Spirit Temple have served as a place for the Zonai to perform some kind of soul transfer ceremony? And could these spirit pods on the wall represent transfer attempts made, or even serve as some sort of storage for their souls? It's certainly hard to tell what the purpose of the Spirit Temple could be, as there was very little in-game explanation. But my best guess is that it's a representation of the intertwined nature of Zonai tech and spirit. Any undertaking like this, creating a technological loophole to avoid death, would be a massive project, and one that would require a lot of Zonite. So perhaps this is part of what fueled their need to descend to the surface, and why they built such extensive mines below. So let's get back to the question of what happened to them. One option is, sure, maybe the Zonai got what they needed from the mines and returned to the skies. However, their total absence from the Sky Islands, to me, indicates that they are gone for good. But if they are gone, it begs the question, what could have possibly taken them out? It certainly wasn't anything we've seen so far in Hyrule. The Zonai surely could have outmatched any of the races or species we've seen with ease. So, barring divine intervention, which frankly is a possibility, I tend to suspect the Zonai crumbled from within, possibly either due to a disease or some sort of greater existential magical threat that would have been powerful enough to destroy them. With all these questions in mind, here's the summary of my theory. The Zonai are arguably the most powerful species that we've seen in the Zelda franchise, but even they had their weaknesses. Perhaps an illness or other existential threat came, one that slowly began the unraveling and destruction of the Zonai Empire. Their people had access to immortality through the secret stones, but since that process was considered taboo and led to the loss of their souls, it wasn't a perfect option. So instead, they tried to counter this threat by attempting to find a way to create immortality through their technology, using Zonite. However, their supplies dwindled, and they had to look to the surface world to replenish their supplies, not just to power their devices, but to secure their own existence. When they reached the surface, they may have encountered resistance from the 5 races of Hyrule, but through diplomacy, collaboration, and sometimes war, they were able to secure the land enough that they could access the plentiful supplies of Zonite far below. Once there, they built massive mines and created a factory that could build their future robot hosts. However, we know this process wasn't perfected until it was too late. Minoru, the last surviving Zonai, was the only one to use it. Somehow, the other Zonai just couldn't crack the code of how to transfer their spirits to the constructs. And in a final act of desperation, they all consumed their secret stones and became dragons. All but 3 returned to the skies, at altitudes far higher than the Sky Islands, or maybe even a different dimension. We don't know who Dinral, Naedra, and Farosh were in their past life, but maybe they retained enough of themselves that, like Zelda, they felt the need to stay connected to the lands of Hyrule. But in the end, Minoru and Rauru were the only remaining Zonai. As we know, Rauru of course sacrificed himself to seal Ganondorf, leaving Minoru as the very last of her kind. And Minoru returned to the task of securing her immortality in order to assist Link in the future, becoming the only Zonai who successfully transferred their spirit into a new form without losing her soul. But once her task was complete, Minoru allowed her soul to pass on, allowing her culture to die with her. All this is to say, we don't actually know what the threat was that caused the Zonai's untimely demise, or if this theory is even remotely close to the truth. But the concept of an ancient advanced civilization, seemingly unstoppable for its time, being brought down, whether through disease, technology turning against them, or even their own hubris, is something that we've seen many times before, both in fictional tropes and human history. In my mind, the only way the mighty Zonai Empire would have crumbled would have to be something similar. Some sort of existential threat that destroyed them from within. While the rest of Hyrule viewed the Zonai as gods, even they couldn't solve the immortality problem. Hope you enjoyed this theory. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts or theories of your own about what could have happened to the Zonai. I really enjoy speculating with you all. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.